Ferris Bueller's Day Off is one of my favourite films of all time. I mean, it's got everything. Great humour, interesting direction, endearing characters, and one of the most elaborate messages about how to live your life in any movie ever. Yeah, seriously, every major character in the movie represents a different viewpoint on life itself. For example, Ferris Bueller himself is an overworked teenager who, just for today, wants to be as happy as humanly possible. After all, life moves pretty fast. If you don't stop and look around once in a while, you might miss it. A lot of people miss the point of Ferris Bueller because they think he's privileged, lazy, and selfish, but in all honesty, I think they're just jealous of him. I mean, who wouldn't be? I know I am, because almost everything in this movie goes exactly the way he wants, regardless of whether he even does anything to cause it. What most people forget is that Ferris doesn't do this every day. He spends most days being miserable at a school he hates, making sure everyone likes him. When you put it that way, it sounds like he works really hard most of the time. It's only in this movie where he does anything for fun. That's not even mentioning that the ending reveals that everything he does is in service of his friends, who he cares about deeply and wants to see be happy. I think we could learn a lot from Ferris Bueller.
Good morning, Retro. It's Burnham. I heard you were doing a Ferris Bueller and I decided to join you. How's about I pop over in my very legitimate Ferrari and you and I can joyride all over Watford?
I'm not doing a Ferris Bueller, I'm genuinely sick.
Retro, you're not sick. You've just convinced yourself that you are. Now, be a good Samaritan and wait outside the building so I can pick you up.
No, Burnham, I'm sick of you manipulating and gaslighting me. You're the worst person I've ever met.
Retro, I keep telling you, gaslighting isn't even a real thing. You made it up.
Oh yeah. Sorry, but I'm still not coming. Ferris Bueller is obviously the star of the movie, but unlike similar films, Ferris Bueller's Day Off is more of an ensemble piece, with every character representing a different perspective on life. At first I thought his girlfriend, Sloane Peterson, was just a simple love interest to exemplify how cool Ferris is, but at a closer look, she too has a very flawed view on life. When Ferris asks if she wants to marry him, her first impulse is to reject him, which is totally reasonable. Ferris is even aware of the variety of reasonable reasons to turn him down, but she doesn't reject him for any of those reasons. In fact, the way I interpret it, she rejects him almost because she feels as if she is supposed to, as she can't find a valid reason on her own. But after thinking about it throughout the movie, she comes to the conclusion that marrying Ferris isn't so unreasonable, because they have amazing chemistry and genuinely love each other. Only then does she allow herself to be happy. Mr. Rooney is similarly responsible for his own unhappiness. I think that even if this movie was about Ed Rooney, then the villain of the movie wouldn't be Ferris. It would still be Ed Rooney. Rooney has this internalized belief that good should always be rewarded and evil should always be punished to stop it from spreading. This philosophy is incredibly flawed because if you step back and think about it, punishing evil doesn't necessarily make it disappear. It usually just makes it come back even stronger. Rooney himself exemplifies this. No matter what happens to him, he keeps getting up to force himself to expose Ferris as the vile delinquent he thinks he is. But Rooney doesn't realise that Ferris is ultimately the better man, because despite his faults, he ultimately wants people to be happy. Rooney's philosophy contrasts this, as if he got his way, everyone would be more miserable than ever. Rooney could just stop what he's doing at any time and go back to his job, but he doesn't, making him the architect behind his own misery. And unlike Sloane, he doesn't change his ways, and he's doomed to be just like this forever.
Hey Retro, have you mentioned how dreadful of an individual one such Ferris Bueller is yet?
We've already had this conversation yesterday at the water cooler, remember? We agreed that Ferris Bueller is a chaotic neutral, bordering on chaotic good.
Fine then, I'll do it. Bueller doesn't realise it, but he is insufferably privileged. He lives in a mansion with his two loving, rich parents. He has no excuse not to fulfill his role, which is something as simple as receiving education. Instead, while all the mature adults, such as yours truly, slave away at miserable jobs, he steals a car and forces his friends on some self-indulgent road trip, all to make himself have a perfect day. But he misunderstands. He will never get a perfect day, because if everything's perfect, nothing will be.
Wow, that was surprisingly thoughtful. Burnham, you kinda remind me of the character of Jeanie, Ferris's sister. She's really interesting because the movie gives her a lot of screen time. At the beginning of the movie, she resents Ferris for being lucky enough to do whatever he wants, whereas she believes she's had to work hard for everything she's ever received. Her character arc is about her coming to terms with the fact that sometimes in life, you just have to live and let live. Life is hard, but just because it is, doesn't mean we have to make it any harder for the people around us. She's more or less told this by Charlie Sheen's character. Charlie Sheen plays the main character in the hit 2012 masterpiece Food Fight, which is obviously his most famous role. I find it funny that he's pretty much playing the exact person he would grow up to be decades later. You know, a drug-fueled crazy person. Oh, you like Charlie Sheen? I've associated with him. He's comprehensively bizarre. Doesn't he, like, do drugs? Oh, retro. Anyone with even a hint of class does drugs. On one occasion, Charlie engulfed 4 pills of disulfiram and then proceeded to down 16 beers. Literally hair-raising. One of the main critiques I hear for this film is that the direction is incredibly bland, which is very wrong. What I've noticed about a lot of art house movies is that their direction can almost feel self-indulgent sometimes, as if they need to prove their directing ability to the pretentious film crowd by going for overly ambitious shots that just end up distracting the audience from the narrative. But Ferris Bueller is different in that the sophisticated and thoughtful direction is rather subtle. In the scene where Cameron finds out about the mileage, they manage to make the movie feel like it has a wider scope than it actually does by adding establishing shots of the entire city. It also does the opposite. When Rooney's on the phone and realizes he's not talking to Ferris, it zooms uncomfortably close to his face, giving it a more tense feel, a technique often associated with the horror genre. Both of these add to the comedy, but the film also uses its direction to put emphasis on character details. I've always adored the shots of Cameron in the art museum. In the director's commentary, John Hughes says that the intention with the scene is that the closer Cameron looks into the painting, the less of a clear image he sees, until eventually he sees just a collection of meaningless dots. This is supposed to highlight his fear that the closer he looks into himself, the more he realizes that there's nothing in him either. I find this to be particularly resonating because in today's age of social media, it can be hard to see where your online persona that you display to the world ends and where you as a conscious being begin. And if none of that convinces you, then this shot will, because of how it pays homage to Star Wars by going through the effort of recreating the exact shot with the Ferrari. They didn't need to do that, but they did anyway because the people behind Ferris Bueller were passionate about the film they were making. That's a nice thought, Retro, but check it out, our first stop.
Hey Burnham, you back for some more 7-gram rocks, even some disulfiram?
Oh no, Charlie. Yesterday's delivery was more than enough. Would you like to join us on our road trip? Just lay low on the drug pushing, this guy Retro, total narc.
Oh, when I was your age I was banging 7-gram rocks and finished them on a daily, because that's just how I roll. The road I was on made Sinatra, Flynn, Jaggers, Richards, all of them looked like droopy-eyed, armless children. My life was awesome, man.
Retro, get in the boot. The front is now reserved for celebrities only.
I know I've talked about Ferris a lot, but I think out of all the characters in this movie, Cameron Frye is the most fascinating to analyse. His dad has complete, unquestioned control over everything he does, and despite this, his dad still doesn't seem to like him at all. Because we never see Cameron's dad, I've chosen to draw him as Clay Puppington from Moral Oral, because they're essentially the same character. Moral Oral is so good, you guys. It only takes like 10 hours to watch and it might be the best show ever made, but anyway. We know that Cameron was raised in an environment where he was expected not to damage any of his dad's rich people items, as they have this unspoken agreement that his possessions are more valuable than his family. This is going to understandably impact Cameron's self-esteem. Cameron's dad is presumably a very furious and possibly physically abusive man, as Cameron is terrified of him to the point that he's basically all that Cameron thinks about throughout the film. This unhealthy fear of his own father motivates nearly all of Cameron's actions. Only after he's fully impacted by Ferris's radical lifestyle does he begin to contemplate his entire life. He only has so much time on Earth before he dies, and he can't waste that whole time fearing his father. So, he takes a stand. He destroys the car, and more importantly, insists on taking the blame. Because of Ferris's reaction, we can tell that this isn't something he's planned. Before this, it's implied that Ferris has planned everything to make the perfect day for him and his friends. But Ferris's shocked reaction tells us that this is an entirely independent decision on Cameron's part, indicating that Cameron has truly changed, even now that Ferris has decided to abandon his narcissistic reconstruction of Cameron's personality.
Rightio, Retro. Where do you want to go next?
Home, because I feel like crap.
Oh, don't be such a spoilsport, Retro. What would Ferris Bueller do?
Well, maybe Ferris Bueller wouldn't plan a road trip for the one day his friend was. What are you doing to the water tank?
Oh, nothing. There was an issue with the water filter, but it's all in tip-top shape now.
Oh, cool. What did you put in the water cooler, Burnham?
Oh, I have not the faintest clue what you are talking about.
How did you know to take the day off on this specific day when I never told you I was ill? Unless, of course, you knew in advance that I'd be sick today. So cut the bullshit and tell me what you put in the water.
It's called disulfiram, Retro.
It reacts with only a small amount of alcohol to cause many effects of a common sickness or hangover, including nausea, vomiting, headaches, and much, much more.
Why would you do that? Because Ferris Bueller is a selfish narcissist and you can't see him as a role model. Maybe in a movie you can have a protagonist who gets everything he wants, but we live in the real world, Retro. As you know, part of the beauty of me is that I'm very rich, and because of that I used to live an incredibly wealthy life. I never worked and I would spend all day sitting around in my mansion. But without any conflict, I felt no joy, no pain, no emotions, nothing. So do you think I just stood by while my youth wasted away? No. I pulled myself together, and I took an oath that no one would ever feel as lifeless as I did. To do this, I needed to become truly vindictive. Everyone needs an antagonist, Retro, otherwise their life lacks any meaning. If everything is perfect for you like it was for Ferris Bueller, you will not be happy. Your selfish hedonism will only ruin the lives of everyone you love and make you feel nothing at all, and that is truly a fate worse than death.
Retro, stop looking so depressed. Nothing bad has happened.
Whoa, Retro, we thought we lost you for a sec there. You good?
Alright then, time for our final stop, the gas station bathroom, because I need to use the loo.
Life moves pretty fast. You don't stop and look around once in a while, you could miss it.